Today we're joined by a true legend in the sport of professional wrestling, none other than Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Thank you for joining us today for this interview.
You're welcome.
I guess my first question would be how you got started in the wrestling business.
Actually, how I got started in the wrestling business is that out of high school, and I was attending a junior college, I wanted to always be a phys ed teacher. I enjoyed teaching kids, and football and wrestling I did fairly well at when I was in high school. So I went to a junior college, and I was going to transfer over to University of Tampa to finish out the second 2 years. Junior college being a 2-year college, and it was right there in St. Pete, Florida, and that's where I grew up. Well, right in this transition period, as I was finishing up the junior college, and checking with my who does the person that's called that does the scheduling. Anyway, and check guidance counselor type of thing. Checking with that, I found out at that time, just as I was getting ready to transfer over to Tampa University, that there was it could be anywhere from a 3 to 5 year wait for a phys ed teacher, physical education teacher in the state of Florida. And I said, well, why is that? And he was telling me that the main reason is that we have a lot of northern coaches, phys ed coaches, that they were coming out of the north, residing and finishing up their teaching career in Florida, because then they would retire.
Right.
So what is happening is that a lot of the junior high and high schools in the state would snatch up a coach that's got 15, 20 years experience. Okay, come down from up north and coaching football or coaching wrestling. Then maybe the coach is looking for about another 4 or 5 years of teaching, and then he's going to retire. He's already in Florida. Everything's cool. So at that time, for somebody to come out of college and get a position in teaching or as in coaching, there was a little bit of a wait in the state of Florida because all this was happening. I had a girlfriend at the time that made a move to Minnesota, and she was going to the Northwest Orient Airline School. Her roommate happened to be Donna Gagne, Vern Gagne's daughter. Vern being the head of AWA.
Right.
So I guess just being a roommate and through conversation, I was still in Florida. We were kept in contact back and forth, talking on the phone. And, just through conversation, my girlfriend would talk, oh yeah, what's your dad do? Oh, your dad's a promoter. Oh yeah, wrestler. My boyfriend wrestled. He did pretty good at it. Amateur background. So just through this back and forth, my girl was invited to Vern's house for dinner one time, being that Donna and her had become friends. So sitting at the dinner table, Vern's sitting there, and he says, I understand Vern's an old timer, and plus a good collegiate wrestler. I think at one time back in the late 40s or the early 50s, he was an alternate on the Olympic wrestling team.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. So, I understand your boyfriend wrestles, did pretty good, this and that. So he says, what's your boyfriend's name? And she said, Richard Blood. And he goes, Blood. God, I've heard of, but he says, believe it or not, I've heard of your boyfriend, which is like a small world.
Right.
Well, how this all came about, during that time in the business, old-time promoters kept in contact with other old-time promoters, and that's how a lot of times they would exchange talent, main event guys. And Vern was very good friends with Eddie Graham.
Florida.
Yes, and that's why I went to school in wrestling. So Eddie at one time had told Vern about me because I had met Mike Graham. I was in the 10th grade. I was a sophomore, and Mike was a senior in high school at the district championships. Okay? And I remember seeing Eddie Graham sitting there at this gymnasium, sitting right there, front row, on those type of fold-out bleachers, Head all bandaged up, and I think he just coming off a program working with Boris Malenko in his Russian chain matches,
Right.
And boy, I was looking over at him, and God, I sort of got intimidated right from the beginning. And then here I am. I was wrestling his son. His son beat me on points. I think he beat me by 2 points. But I felt good about it because he was a senior in school and I was a sophomore. I went on and kept wrestling and did real well at it. But this is how my name came up through Eddie Graham. I was talking to Vern because these two old timers were real big into amateur wrestlers. If you had a good amateur background and you want to go through their camp, they would welcome you, I think, a lot more than if you were just a barroom brawler.
Right.
They know what kind of price that you paid to be an amateur wrestler, the training that you went through, and on and on and on. So, and through that, Vern said, "Well, I've heard about Richard Blood down there in Florida. He's a pretty good amateur wrestler." Our girl said, "Yeah." So she called me up and was really excited about this. She said, "You can't believe it. This old time promoter up here in Minnesota has heard about your amateur background through Eddie Graham in Florida." So I was kind of in a transition period, like I said earlier, whether I was going to go on to another 2 years and then do the waiting list thing with being a phys ed coach. And then I just said, well, maybe I ought to try my hand at pro wrestling. So I said that. She talked to Vern. Vern said, have him send me a resume. I sent a resume and I got a starting date. Started a wrestling camp there. That's basically how that all came about.
Who are some of the veterans that really helped you as far as trained you in the ring?
We're going through Vern's camp on occasion. Billy Robinson would come down. And most of the time when he'd come down to stretch him.
Right.
And maybe at that time it was just to fulfill a little bit of an ego that he had.
Right.
Come down and the Englishman would stretch you a little bit. Kaz Vaziri, the Iron Sheik, was the guy that was there every day, 5 hours a day. He was a major influence of our camp, and he would stretch you. He was a great Iranian amateur wrestler.
Right.
I think in 1974 he was a Pan American Games gold medalist. So, bodyguard to the Shah of Iran. I mean, the guy was a tough guy. There were a lot of the Vern's main event guys didn't come down and share too much with us. Most of our camp was just in the beginning, about the first 3 or 4 weeks, was just a lot of exercise. And I think there was about 16 guys that first came out. And it wasn't but about 2 weeks later there was 4 of us left.
Right. Were you able to pick up the business pretty quick, or?
Well, Kaz tells me that I was his best pupil. So out of the 4 guys, do you know who the other 3 were?
No.
You've heard Jan Nelson,
No.
Scott Irwin.
Yes.
Okay. I think he passed away with some kind of brain cancer,
Yeah.
retina cancer, something like that. Okay. And Buck Zumhoff.
Yep.
And, it was me. That was the 4 of us. Jan, I don't think he wrestled that long afterwards. Just maybe 2 or 3 years. I heard he died at a Rolling Stones concert in the men's bathroom with his needle in his arm. And then, of course, we know Scott died of cancer. I don't know what Buck Zumhoff's doing.
Neither do I. No. What are some of the first territories that you worked for?
Well, Vern.
Right.
Worked for Vern after I went through. The camp was about 3 months, about 11 or 12 weeks. After that, worked with the AWA for probably about 8 weeks, 2 months. And then I went shipped down to Florida. And I was kind of happy to hear that. He came and told me, he says, well, you've been here for a couple of months wrestling in the AWA. I'm going to send you down to Florida and you're going to wrestle down there for Eddie Graham. Well, I grew up down in Florida and I was almost happy to go back home. But I didn't wrestle there very long, maybe just 2 or 3 months.
Right.
What was his name? Jim Barnett, working with Georgia Championship Wrestling, and I think at that time that was like mid-70s or something like that. I think at that time he might have owned a piece of Florida.
Right.
I'm not sure though. And he came down to TVs a lot, and I was just a green young talent, and he wanted me to come to Atlanta and work for Atlanta, Georgia Championship Wrestling. I think I'd only been in Florida 1 week. And I kind of declined. Tried to do it as nice as I could here. You know, I'm really green, right? 2 months into the business. I said, well, look, I grew up here in Florida. You know, I've just gotten back. I've been away. I think at this time I've been away close to a year. Went to Minnesota on the starting, which I thought was the starting date of the wrestling camp, and it got postponed, weeks later into months and this and that. I think it was finally 6 months later that the camp finally started. But I was up there for a year, got tired of Minnesota snow. Happy to get back to Florida. And I just said, look, I've only been home for a week. And so he would come to TV almost every single week and ask me, would you come wrestle for me in Georgia Championship?
Everybody does the invitation.
Yeah. Oh, my boy. Right?
Everybody.
So I think after 2 months, Eddie came to me and he said, look, Barnett really wants you to go to Georgia Championship Wrestling. And I think it would be a good move for you. It might give you a little bit of a break too, maybe a couple main event spots. So after just 2 months in Florida, went to Georgia Championship Wrestling. I was there for almost probably about a year.
All right.
And after that, at the latter part of 1976, went to Carolinas.
Who are some of the guys you worked with in Georgia before you went up to the Carolinas?
Slater, Dick Slater,
right?
He was main event guy. I got a story about with the Booker at that time. If you heard of Tom Ernesto,
Yes.
Yeah, I was there maybe just for a couple of months, and Ernesto said, "Look, we're gonna give you a push, and we're gonna give you work with Dick Slater." At that time, I think Slater was working a program with Wrestling 2, Johnny Walker. And so what we're going to do is that we're going to have you work this week with Slater on TV. We're going to have Slater go over this week. We're going to bring you back next week and work with Slater. And you're going to go over. And then we're going to have the tiebreaker match. And out of that, we're going to work an angle. Well, that sounds fine, you know. So that week I worked with Slater. I put him over. Second week of TV, we all show up. I think we did it on Saturday mornings. Like you had to be there like 8:30. That was rough. After Friday night, and so I wasn't even booked to be on TV or anything. And I said, "What are we doing?" So we're going to do that next week. Next week, same old story. Never happened. I ended up putting Slater over.
Right.
I didn't mind. You know, I'm green in the business. Just been in the business for maybe at that time about 6 months or so, 8 months. God, who am I to say? No, I'm not going to put Dick Slater over. He's a main event guy. Didn't have to swerve me for me to put him over.
Right.
Tell me the story. So, Dean Iguchi, Dean Ho, was a real big influence of mine when I was in Georgia for a year. We lived in the same apartment complex, and he was just around the corner from me. Would have me over his place every single day to eat. And when I traveled every single day to and from the matches. And at that time, Georgia was the type of territory in which you'd work Monday through Saturday and have Sunday off. Never worked on Sunday. Never worked. So every Sunday I was over at his place. He'd have a barbecue going on. He was a big influence. Good worker. Not a great worker, but a good worker. And we would talk, and he would teach me ring psychology and why would you do this in a match and why you do that. Actually helped develop my style when I got into doing some of that karate stuff in the ring, because that's what he used.
Right.
And he said, "No, I don't have a problem with passing it along to you." You know, so I would say that first year there probably wasn't anybody else while I was in Atlanta during that first year. Hang out with nobody else. It was just probably mostly Dean with his wife, and I think they had 1 or 2 kids. I was just hanging out with him every single day. I was by myself, worked out together, and just rode. He never got in the ring to show bumps or everything like that. Basically, we just
psychology.
Yeah, just classroom type work,
Right.
You know, talking this and that. But it really helped me.
Now you went to the Carolinas. Who were some of the first guys you worked with up there?
I wasn't there. I wasn't there maybe 6 months. And then Flair wanted to went to Jim Crockett and do an angle with him.
Right.
So prior to that, I was doing opening matches. God, names escape me on who I worked with back at that time. God, going back 24, 25 years ago. But Flair was the biggest influence when he went to Crockett Promotions. Wanted to do an angle for. I guess at that time that's when Flair had the TV championship.
Right.
Yeah.
You guys did the thing where you guys ripped each other's clothes off and stuff like that.
Yeah. That was good.
It was classic stuff. What are your memories of some of the stuff you did with Rick? And what was Rick like back in that time?
Believe it or not, even though that Flair has been in the business, I guess, what did we say, 27, 28 years? 20, somewhere around there. And knowing Rick, I don't speak with him too often now, but the times that I have in the past 5 years, he's like wine. He's aged, and you can see that he's aged. But he's better. He is. He can't go like the way Rick could go. He can't take that upside down turnbuckle bump. Maybe it's 1 out of 2 now. Maybe 1 out of 3 he makes it over.
Right.
The other 1 or 2 he doesn't. But he's the same. Maybe he's also mellowed out as he's gotten a little older now with this nighttime lifestyle. But I still hear, occasionally the Ric Flair will come out on occasion.
Did you feel the chemistry between you guys early on?
Yes. It was a natural thing. I am, you look at my physical features, darker skin, different eyes, black hair. Here's Flair with, he would always stay tan though, but with the blonde hair. Interviews totally different. I'm an A, he's a Z. I'm straight baby face, he's straight heel. Very humble, very quiet. Taught me a lot in the business. Timing, he'd talk to me in the match. Come on, come back, fight back. Sell this, sell that. Probably as to get started in the main event. I would have to say that I have to owe. This is Ricky Steamboat talking. I owe probably everything to Flair.
Wow.
Yeah. Influence, listening to him in and out of the ring. So you can see as that started pretty much myself to be on a main event from that point on in my career with Flair. And through the years at the Carolinas, I don't remember, and I couldn't honestly tell you. I'd have to really think about it hard. How many different times him and I hooked up while we were, working that territory for 9 or 10 years before I went to WWF.
Right.
So, God, but he was just probably the major influence in my wrestling career.
At what point did you start working the 45 to 60-minute matches?
I think when it was a point that we could. In other words, we could work a 45-minute match or a 60-minute match, or we've done many 59 minutes, 40-some seconds.
Right.
When we realized we could carry it off.
Where did your work ethic come from? And were some guys intimidated to work with you?
If they did, then nobody ever said anything to me. After a while, everybody sort of got the reputation, the idea that Steamboat does like to put in time in the ring, and if you want to have a good match with Steamboat, in which everybody knew that I would give it my best shot, give it my 100%, but you somewhat got to get in shape, because I like to go 35, 40 minutes every single night. And then you have the guys that want to go out there and go 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes every single night. But that was to me, out of everything about our business, the politics of the business, the traveling aspect of the business, as your family. The working in the ring was the fun time, and that was my time. And if I was a main event guy, and I understood it to be that I had a 60-minute time limit, you know, even though many times the booker or the agent says, Ricky, all we need is 20 minutes tonight. I can't tell a story. I mean, I'm just getting warmed up. You know? We just got first 20 minutes. We just got finished maybe making the baby face shine a little bit, and now it's time for the heel to start getting some heat.
Right.
You know, with Flair, and then I would sell him for 20 minutes. You know,
Right.
We're 40 minutes into the match. Now we're starting to think about maybe we ought to start lining it up to go home. You know, but we're 40 minutes into the match every night. So it got to be the rap that if you're getting married to Steamboat and working a program with him for a couple of months, and a lot of guys did, you better get in shape. All of a sudden you'd find him at the gym. You'd see him on the Stairmaster. You know, guy weighing 290 pounds, never been on a Stairmaster in his life. And all of a sudden he's on a Stairmaster because he's going to be working a program with me for 6 weeks.
What do you remember working with Roddy Piper back then?
Oh, Piper was crazy. I mean, but then again, you know, the way I think back on Flair, and now I think back on Roddy, a little more mellowed, you know, aged a little better like wine. Demeanor's a couple of notches below. Same with Flair.
Right.
But he's still Roddy, you know, still Roddy. He wouldn't back down from nobody, wouldn't back down from Andre the Giant. And I'm not saying that to say that if there's any confrontation, I'm just using the physical difference. Roddy Piper wouldn't back down for nobody. Yeah. And if he was your friend, it didn't matter if it was 4 o'clock in the morning and you were 100 miles away, stuck someplace, he would come get you. Yes, he would.
What was Jim Crockett like?
I think Jimmy, to me, tried to project, and maybe he did it to guys like me because I'd only been in the business for a little bit over a year or so when it came to Carolinas. Tried to project, and I think back on this now because you just asking me this question, is that tried to project that he knew about the business. And I guess logically thinking you would think so because he grew up with Jim Sr. that ran the company for many, many years, I don't know, 20 or 30 years,
Right.
before passing it into passing on to his son. And why? Because he passed away. But I don't think Jimmy had a real foothold on the business. Example for somebody as trying to compare like a Vince. You know, the way Vince grew up with Vince Sr., same scenario, 2 sons, got their father's business. But as you can see, what the mindset that Vince had and what he's done with it, and opposed to what the downfall that led to with Jimmy, he could get persuaded, and very easily, I think, to go down the wrong path. I think Dusty had a big influence on the problems with the company.
Right.
Trying to grow too big too fast, you know, and just couldn't keep up with the Joneses.
I was going to ask you about Dusty later, but what are some of your memories of your matches with Harley Race?
Harley, you know, from the old time school, liked me very much. I know Harley did. Harley was big on going back and forth to Japan. And I guess during my career, I went back and forth about 12 or 13 times. And it almost seemed, for timing, I don't know why, but I would have to say 8 or 9 out of my 12 tours to Japan, Harley was on the tour. Worked with him a little bit over in Japan. Worked with him when he was world champion going around. But Harley, if he had respect for you, he would take care of you in the match. Now, Race is a tough guy, and you don't want to cross him. You know, he's a tough man. He got in a real bad car accident years back, and he's got this steel rod in his arm.
Right.
You know that?
Yeah.
And the guy's got big fat fingers and a big fist, you know. And boy, with that steel rod, I mean, if he ever nailed you with it, it'd be peeling you off the pavement. And he had also a reputation that he would not back down from anybody. He was a tough, strong. God, what did he do to me that just amazed me? At that time, I was a big muscle head, and I was into pumping iron and everything. Harley never pumped. I mean, maybe early in his career, he might have worked out with some weights. God, he did something to me, something about reaching over the top rope and picking me up by my wrestling tights over the top rope back into the ring. You know, and I was 230 pounds, one arm, which was kind of amazing. You know, off the ring apron.
Right.
You know, just to grab you by the back of your wrestling tights and pick you up over the top rope and bring you in the ring. Kind of, you know, and I just was, holy shit, you don't mess with this man, you know. But Harley, if he liked you, he took care of it. I had great matches with Harley. Taught me a lot. Just like Flair, even though styles were a little different, Flair was a little bit more flashy, but Harley was timing.
How did you get paired with Jay Youngblood?
Steve Romero. That's his real name.
Sure.
So it was around 19. I'm thinking late 78, 79. He came in from, I guess, Portland. I think originally Jay is from Texas. God, I don't know. We got riding together, going to the matches, and Rob, I think maybe it was just through discussion that maybe we could go as a tag team. Went into Jim Crockett and said, "How about teaming us up?" And at that time, the company at that time didn't want me to go so much as tag team. They wanted to keep me out there single so I could work with guys like Flair and Blackjack Mulligan and Greg Valentine.
Right.
But teaming me up with Jay would tie that up a lot and not give me that opportunity. Although when we eventually did get tagged up and we proved that we were a good tag team and we could draw some money for the company, we had some matches with Flair and Valentine as they were tagged up.
Right.
Yeah.
And also the Briscoes.
Briscoe brothers, Sergeant Slaughter, Don Cornoodle, great matches.
What are your memories of some of those matches?
People ask me, my favorite matches. And of course, the public would ask you about my match with Savage at WrestleMania 3, my matches with Flair in 1989 when I won the belt, and then we had the rematch, which was 2 out of 3 falls.
Right.
They're always asking me about those two, and I understand why, because those two got a lot of PR. Wrestling magazines, they were paid-per-view shows, right? And they got a lot of PR. Not knowing that prior to those 2 particular matches, God, the great matches that I had with Youngblood as tag team with Jack and Jerry Briscoe. The matches we had with Sergeant Slaughter and Don Cornoodle. People, they don't know about those matches, but maybe the fans in the Carolinas do.
Right.
When they come to the live show and watch it. Those were just unbelievable matches.
What was the story behind your retirement match in, I think it was 82 with Sergeant Slaughter?
So
I know they did the big video for you.
that was a match. I think that came about. It was a stipulation that we started doing stuff back then that was unheard of, such as filming on TV, a signing of a contract for a wrestling match.
Right.
We started doing that. And at that time, Crockett, and I think who was it with maybe George Scott was booking at the time. But we thought, we were so way ahead of our time. But I don't think that wasn't a single match between Slaughter and myself. That match was a build-up for a big match that we had in Greensboro, which was Jay and myself against Slaughter and Canoodle.
Right.
In a cage. And then he threw this last stipulation at me while we were sitting at the table. Make the big surprise to
Right.
Steamboat. That if we didn't win, that I think Jay and I would also have to dissolve. Of course, dissolve as a tag team, but then I would have to retire from the business if we didn't win the match. Well, we won the belt, so we didn't have to do that. But that's just another little angle we threw in there.
Now, did you work for Georgia Championship Wrestling at all?
Georgia?
Yeah.
Yes, Ole was booking.
Right, I was going to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
What was Ole like as booker?
Ole was a real hard nose. He was a real hard nose. He wouldn't take lip from nobody, and it had to be his way or no way. I thought he was an okay guy, but I thought he was. I mean, there was no gray area. Either his way or I'll find you another place to go. He's actually the one that found me call up Carolinas. He got me to Carolinas.
Right.
Yeah.
Were you shocked when Jay passed away?
Yes. Yeah. Young man, 29 years old.
What are your memories of the All Japan tours
Mm.
and working for Giant Baba?
Mm. You know, Rob, I found for me for those tours, it was a struggle. As though as nice as they tried to make it.
Was it the style, or was it being away from the States? Or
No, I did work with some of the Japanese, but my mother was from Japan, right? And over there, all the Japanese wrestlers were baby faces, and most of the Americans were heels going over there to work. And all of a sudden, after one or two tours, I found myself being in with the Japanese guys and working every night with the Americans. And they loved it. Every night, every show we'd go to, they'd look at the card that was put up on the wall, and all the guys, the American guys, they were all hoping to say, "Oh God, I hope I got Steamboat tonight," you know, instead of Jumbo or somebody,
Right,
you know,
right.
or Tenaru, because
Stiff.
yeah, they're stiff, and plus, you know, you're working in their backyard, and they're for some reason, all of a sudden, that same guy, I knew Tenaru when he came to the Carolinas, and he would work hard. But it was amazing the difference work ethic that he had working here in the States, and he's working there in this country. Oh God, you better get in shape, buddy, or they're going to run you over. And so the Americans, whenever we get into the locker room, they look, "Oh, who do you have tonight?" And they say, "Oh, I got Rick. I got Steamboat tonight." You know. So the working part of it, although I did have several matches with the Japanese guys, and a lot of them were just babyface matches, which is sometimes like grinding teeth out there. And but you know, I just found the tours were hard. We did a lot of traveling, and some days it was 16-hour days to get you where you had to go. Yeah. One day we did every form of transportation to get to this one little spot show. I mean, it was from the plane to the taxi to the Greyhound bus, the bus to the train to a ferry, you know, crossing over this channel, you know, back onto another taxi cab. You know, it was for what everything. We did everything except for a damn horse and donkey just to get there.
Going back to the Carolinas, do you have any good road stories from that era? Stick out in your mind?
Oh God, let me give you an example. Jack and Jerry Briscoe, and I hope you guys don't mind me telling this story. This is a great story. This happened on more than one occasion. They would be driving back from Greensboro. Greensboro was about an hour and a half drive, and those two guys like to drink their beer. God, those guys like to drink their beer. Well, one story goes that Gerald, who always drove, if it was just the two of them together, Jack would ride shotgun and Gerald would be driving. Gerald drove from Greensboro to Charlotte. You get on Interstate 85, just go south on 85, you run right into Charlotte. Well, he drove all the way through Charlotte, past Charlotte, until the car ran out of gas. They're almost down like Greenville, South Carolina. Another hour and a half, 2-hour drive. They pull over, and Jack, who was in the car sleeping, Gerald wakes him up and he goes, Jack. Yes, Gerald. Jack, I ran out of gas. Get some gas, Gerald. So they're out. He's out. This is 2:00 in the morning. And he's out there in the interstate. And Jack, Gerald starts walking the interstate. Goes to the next exit. It could be in a mile. Could have been 10 miles. And he comes back with a can of gas. Jack is sleeping inside the car with his head rested up against the window. And Gerald needs to. Jack locked the car.
Right.
Because he knew he was going to fall asleep. Gerald needed to get back in the car. Keys were in the ignition to unlock the gas cap on the outside of the car. Hit the button on the inside and flips it. He banged it. He said, Gerald told me later, he said, man, I banged on that window so hard to wake up Jack that every time I was banging on that damn window to get him to wake up and unlock the car, I could see his head bouncing off the glass. Just every time I hit boom. Finally, after about, he said a dozen times or so, he finally woke up. And they did the same thing. Now, let me change it. I said coming from Greensboro through Charlotte. That particular one was driving from Richmond, Virginia, to Charlotte. Now, Greensboro was an hour and a half. Richmond was 5 hours. So they left Richmond, let's say 10 o'clock, drove through Charlotte at 3 o'clock in the morning, and then kept on driving. That was 300 miles from Richmond to Charlotte. He kept on driving, and he ran out of gas.
That's great.
They didn't get back home till like 6 or 7 o'clock the next morning.
What are some of your memories of working with Tully Blanchard?
Hard worker. Everybody, and I know Tully today, and he would probably agree with me. Everybody that knew Blanchard knew that Tully had a little bit of an attitude. He had a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. I understand he was a good athlete in high school. I think football quarterback in college or something like that,
right.
And also in high school. Not a bad ball player, which leads you to believe that he probably has a good work ethics about working out and keeping in shape, to be able to do it. But I think maybe it had something to do with his dad being a promoter down there in a couple of towns down there in Texas, right? The Blanchard name. And really not being the biggest of heels. But off camera, he always had that little chip on his shoulder. And it sort of carried through on camera when he did his interviews. And it also carried through into the way he worked in the ring. And so the fans viewed Tully as that he wasn't the biggest of all heels. But God bless them, they hated him because he was a cocky son of a bitch out there in the ring, and he just and a little bit of that rubbed off even when in real life for Tully. Everybody say, yeah, Tully, but he's got that chip on his shoulder. Sometimes he gets that attitude, man. You just want to slap the shit out of him or something,
Right.
Yeah.
Now, when NWA started to go northeast, you headlined a few shows against Ric Flair. How were those matches received by the traditional WWF crowds? In fact, I think you wrestled the Meadowlands against Ric Flair.
Excellent response. I'm sure that I know the fans that were the true wrestling fans that followed the business either heard about or saw some of Flair's in my matches. The fans that travel around every night. But we also knew that when we went to the Meadowlands to wrestle, that there had been, there's some great workers up there in the WWE. I mean, you had the San Martinos and the Pedro Moraleses, and Tony Guerrera and, Killer Kowalski and all the great heels. And so this is what, all the fans in that Northeast area saw year after year. Here's Steamboat Flair coming in. We sort of wanted to make a statement, and we really wanted to, a lot of times the attitude, and I don't understand why, guys that would go out of their territory to wrestle would sometimes want to go out there and just have a match just to get by. I'm up here visiting my so and so and so and so, and I just got booked to work tonight. Help cover expense. But tomorrow I'm heading back to Texas. I've been working down there for 3 years, but I've come over here to Carolinas because I got a sister that lives here, and I'm just visiting with her and her kids for a couple of days. So I booked a match with Crockett, and he's get a little payday to help cover the gas money. And those type, you'd always see they'd have a good match, but it isn't like what you'd hear about them.
Right.
Well, Flair and I, it didn't matter if we were wrestling in front of 20,000 or 10 people. We'd go out there and wrestle 40, 45 minutes and gives them, there wasn't anything different in our match. I look at it this way: the mechanics of everything. A body slam's a body slam, backdrop's a backdrop, and dive off the top rope is a dive off the top rope. But it's all the fine tuning stuff that we do in there. How did I sell? How did he sell? How did he get heat? When did we do this and when did we do that? When was it my turn to make that big comeback? How long did he carry the heat? Could he carry the heat for 20 minutes? That's why we could work so well together, is because I guess we did it so many times. We knew what to do with each other.
Now, sorry, go ahead.
I don't know if one of your questions are. I don't recall if one of your questions have always. I get asked which of the two matches, the one that we talked about earlier with Randy Savage,
right,
and the one with Flair. I get asked which one of those two is my favorite.
I will ask you that.
Okay.
You want to answer now, or?
This is when you get
Okay. Now, when Dusty Rhodes came in the book for Crockett, how did the company change? So I think you and Roddy Piper are two guys that basically walked out when Dusty came in.
Well, I went to the WWF at that time.
Right. Did you think it was the right time to leave, or did you guys have differences?
Well, I just saw the writing on the wall. Dusty was he's Booker / babyface, right?
Right.
He's the guy with the pencil, plus he's the babyface too. And I was babyface in that territory for several years. I saw the writing on the wall. It started with Tully, and I would wrestle. I think at that time he had beaten me for the TV belt. At that time, the time limit, even though the match was a 60-minute time limit, but for the first 20 minutes, the TV championship was up.
Right.
It made it kind of interesting, a little different. And so I would wrestle Tully all around the territory and beat him, but after the 20-minute mark. I'd win the match, but I didn't win the belt. So then we'd come back and we'd do interviews for the next shows and say, okay, we've extended the time limit to 30. So I would go, and the first time I think I beat him like in 25 minutes, 5 minutes over the time limit. So now we got 30 minutes. So well, I got 5 minutes to spare. So I'm going to win the belt. Well, we go all around the territory, and I would beat him at, the 35 or 40-minute mark. Just 5 or 10 minutes after the 30-minute mark. Then we went around, I think we went as far around as a third time with Blanchard, in which we extended the time limit to 45 minutes on the belt. And it was in Greensboro, and I beat him like in 47 minutes or something like that, 2 minutes after And Blanchard had a great way of painting a picture of being able to show the fans how he could cheat the time. In other words, people kept saying, how in the world was he able to keep extending, staying away from you? First you went 20 minutes and then you went 30 minutes, now you're going 45. And every single time you kept beating him like 2 or 3 minutes after the time limit expired. So everybody thought was, damn, Steamboat, you're going to get him next time because they just gave you an extra 10 minutes. You're going to get him for sure. But Blanchard had a great persona and a great way of projecting, and the people could see it. Oh, he's stalling, and all this and all that.
Right.
Says, damn, and I'd be chasing after him, running around and all this and all that. But after we had done that Greensboro match, in which I didn't beat him for the belt, but I did beat him, and it was only a couple minutes after the time limit expired. And Dusty came back to Greensboro after that match with Blanchard and beat Tully in 12 minutes and took the TV belt. And then Dusty immediately started hooking me up with Nikita Koloff. So I think Nick at that time had just been working a year or two in the business. And he big Russian, you know, had a great look about him. And I think, and a new heel, new guy on the block. So I saw the writing on the wall because I saw things that were happening on TV. He'd have Nikita come up and clothesline me from behind as I'm walking up the aisle back to the locker room and stuff like that. And then I know that he's just trying to build up Nikita because I could see, and which happened later on, the writing on the wall was that it was Dusty and Nikita. It's, you know, the American dream against the Russian nightmare.
Right.
I mean, it looked good on paper. So I just decided it was time for, you know, I've been there for several years, time for me to go. George Scott at that time was booking for Vince, starting up there with the big WrestleManias and everything. And I think timing was good for me to go.
Now, how different was the WWF when you first entered it compared to Jim Crockett's promotion?
You know, at that time, all the guys, oh man, we're going to be flying everywhere instead of driving. You know, we're going to be flying to Philly, Dallas, LA, instead of driving. I remember that was a big comment with everybody. Come to find out, everybody wanted to get back to driving. You know, you could pull over at a gas stop and get something to drink. You could just, if you got hungry, you could pull into the drive-thru. You know, you weren't stuck with a plane full of people like a bunch of cattle in a round cylinder, breathing all these germs, and everybody's gagging and coughing, and somebody's sick or this baby next to you is crying. You know, God bless it. Everybody says, "Man, this traveling by air this is shit. You know, I want to get in my car and drive, put the windows down, and roll down the highway with the air coming in."
Right.
You know, and we were doing this traveling by, you know, every single day. It was different time zones, jet lag, you know, and every now and then you would get booked in a part of the country to where maybe you could be there for 2 or 3 days. You know, Florida, you could maybe wrestle Tampa and Miami and
California.
California, out there in LA, San Diego, San Francisco, you know, Anaheim. That was, whenever we saw those bookings, everybody was like, it was a breath of fresh air. But other than that, they would have you go, you know, you could go New York, you know, Chicago down to Dallas, Dallas up to Montreal, Montreal down to Miami, Miami over to Portland, Portland over here to Philly, Philly up, you know, to Minneapolis, Minneapolis down to, you know, New Mexico. So it was horrifying.
What were your initial impressions of Vince McMahon?
Very likable guy, you know. At the beginning, here's a guy that doing something in the business that actually changed everything about our business as we talk today. Going coast to coast with TV, running roughshod over all the other promoters' TV. You know, I'm sure you understood that everybody that had their territory, from the Von Erichs to, you know, Texas, to Bill Watts out there in Oakland, you know, the Crockett Carolinas, Eddie Graham down in Florida, Vern up in Minnesota, you know, that everybody, I don't think anything was written down on paper. It was just a word and a handshake that you keep your TV in your territory, I keep mine in mine. That way, when we exchange talent, I got a new guy that's come in that nobody's seen, but he's a good worker, you know. And Vince just decided to the heck with all that and just go coast to coast TV, which is.
Do you think it was smart, or do you think it was against the code of ethics?
Well, Rob, you got to understand that guys like Flair and Savage, Tully Blanchard, Dick Slater, we all came around that time to where we were all taught from the old timers, the Vern Gagnes, the Bruno Sammartinos, the Eddie Grahams, you know, all those guys that paid their dues and taught us the work ethic as we understood it. Have respect for your main event. Hey, even to this day, but I know my first year of the business, I was a yes or no sir guy. I talked to some old timer, and I didn't care if he was, you know, had passed his prime and he was doing the opening match in the card. But if, you know, his reputation speaks for itself and what he had done while he's in the business. You know, maybe he was a main eventer for 25 years, and now he's just hanging on. But I was a yes or no sir type of guy. But Vince was I think at that time he was a very likable guy, and I think that was a natural persona about Vince at that time, trying to fit in, okay, taking a big step in the business, making history, doing a lot of changes, trying to get the right talent, and then everybody sees Vince as we see him today. You know, it's a totally different man, you know, totally different. Egos come into the factor, you know, power and strength will always play a factor on your attitude, you know. He says, oh, especially just buying out WCW. You know, he says, hey, I'm the man now.
Right.
You know.
Were any of the WWF wrestlers intimidated by your work ethic when you first entered?
You know, once again, Rob, that question was like earlier,
Right.
because I like to go put in time. You know, just off the wall, nobody come up to me directly and say, Steamboat, you know, damn it, you got to go from 40 minutes a night and cut it back to maybe 20, you know. Because if my match follows you, that means I got to sit in the locker room for another 20 minutes. Nobody really ever said that to me. Although you could sort of feel it around you. You can, for some, you have that uncanny, you can feel it, you know, every now and then. But no, I think when I first went to WWF, my first real angle was with Don Morocco and
That was my next question, actually.
Yeah, Don Morocco and Mr. Fuji. No. And Morocco, God, he was 280. I remember him in Florida as the babyface. You know, he's about 6'2", 6'3", babyface in Florida, 228 pounds. God, he looked like a Polynesian god when he walked in. A tanned, abs, big cap shoulders, handsome face, black hair, you know. And then when he went up to the WWF there in the mid-'80s, and he's working heel with Mr. Fuji, and I said, God, sometime he got to 300 pounds. You know, big guy. Work ethic, no. Morocco would be there, foaming at the mouth, drooling, trying to suck as much air as he could get, blow it up, but you couldn't stop him. He would be there. You know, if it was time for my comeback and we've been going 30 minutes and it was time for him to bounce and bump, he would fly for you. I don't know how he did it. He looked like he was on the verge of dying, passing out, throwing up, having a miscarriage, all in the same time.
Right.
But the guy would be there. Backdrop, hip toss, over the top rope. Come on, throw me over the top. Come off the top rope with a dive onto the floor with me. I'll be there. And I'm sitting there wondering, as I'm climbing the rope and I look down there on the floor and he's getting up, is he really going to be there? Because I'm looking at the guy that I've been working with for 30 minutes. Dude, shit all over, running down his chest. Piece of throw up hanging off his side of his face.
Right.
You know, you've been out on an all night drunk the night before, you know, him and Fuji. You know, is he going to be there for me as I do this dive off the top rope down to the floor?
Right.
Yeah, the guy was there. And every single time he was there.
How would you compare Ric Flair and Randy Savage? You worked with both of them. You had great matches.
Yes. Okay. Let me recap that question real quick.
Okay.
The most asked question of all my matches is between the Randy Savage and Ric Flair match. Okay. Savage being in 87, Flair 89. And the reason why is that those got a lot of coverage because they were pay-per-view shows. There was a lot of build-up on them. And when I answer it this way, and I'm answering it this way to the camera, being very candid, this is an answer that I usually give when I'm with the boys. But, you know, hey, this is year 2001. The business is where it's at. There's been a lot of exposure. So this is my answer. Savage and mine, and the match that we had at WrestleMania 3, Savage was the kind of guy that was a very detailed worker. He would like everything lined up in your match. If you had locker room time at a house show, regular house show. You're working with Savage for the evening. He would spend as much time with you as he possibly could, and if he liked you. If he didn't like you, he would just go out there and have a match and take as much as he could take. But if he got along good with you and knew that you were, on the same level playing field as him and trying to have collectively a great match, he would be there for you. But getting ready we did the angle, which he came off the top rope on my throat with the plywood and the announcer's bell.
Right.
And that was done, I think, in around December of '76. Of course, WrestleMania wasn't in until March of,
right.
I'm sorry, '86.
Right.
And so we had 3 or 4 months of TV to build up on it, which they don't have that luxury now. But we may talk about that later. So as we're going, we say, hey, we know we got this big match. This is WrestleMania 3. It's at the Silverdome. Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan are headlining it. We were the main event right below that. And we both understood, said, well, we know that Andre and Hogan are going to be the ones that selling the tickets. People are going to pay to see that. I mean, we've got some interest there. But let's understand the way Vince and Hogan and Andre collectively have put together the main event for this WrestleMania 3. And then, of course, we had some friendly mentions, Savage and Steamboat. We did the angle on TV. Did a couple interviews afterwards, like I couldn't talk. But let's say, they sold the show. No giving back on that. It was Andre and Hogan. But I told Savage, I said, damn it, let's go out there and steal it. They sold the show, we'll steal the show. I knew Andre had a bad back. He's hurting. They're not going to, 500-pound man's not going to bump. It's going to be a relatively boring match. And I think it kind of ended up that way, which is the bear hug.
Right.
Especially after the fans got to see our match, which we were just right before that. But Savage, he was detailed, and he wanted everything lined up from step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. I mean, step 1, believe it or not, Rob, was lockup. Now, you get a couple of old pros out there in the wrestling, why would you have to write step 1 as lockup? You would lock up, right? But that was Savage. Very detailed. We got to, we're up to step 285. Page after page. I had a spiral bound notebook, And the nights that we would be working against each other, we would always meet in one or the other's hotel room. Why? We would have our notebook. After we'd written out the whole match and all the steps, I would turn to page, 3, and I said, okay, I'm on step 197, and Randy, it's this, and this. Tell me the rest of the match. And he said, okay, step 198 is this, step 199 is this, step 200 is this, and on and then all the way through the match. And then the next night we would meet, if we were in the same town, booked in the same town, and he'd go, okay, Steamboat, I'm on step number 97, tell me the rest of the match. And we would do this every single night, or every time that we were in the same town. We had the match down. I think the reason being is 16-minute match, almost 20-some false finishes, 22, 21 false finishes. We had a false finish every 45 seconds, which was, unusual. It was usually you'd have a babyface would shine, doing some babyface high spots. The heel would stop to get some heat, and then there would be the comeback, and you go home. Well, we had, from the get-go, we had just false finishes, and people then started getting into it. After 8, 9, 10 false finishes.
It was awesome.
Yeah. Now, that just tells you the mechanics of that particular match, right? That's the way Savage liked to do it. Flair and I, 89, return match, I think, down in New Orleans, 2 out of 3 falls. We went 57 minutes. We went into that match knowing 3 things. The 3 falls. In a 57-minute match. The rest, we said, see you in the ring.
Wow.
We're going to win it. We've been worked with each other, so we just see you in the match, see you in the ring. So there's the difference. You got a 16-minute match with 280-some steps. You got almost an hour match going and knowing 3 things. Which do you think is the more professional? Yeah, you get a couple old timers that can wing a match for an hour, and just all they knew was going in was their 3 finishes. And that's So obviously it was a Flair. For me, it was the Flair match, because that's just showing what a couple old pros can do.
Right.
Didn't have no. You want it now? Call it in the ring. Feel it out. We'll listen to the crowd. I said, all right, buddy. Just like the way we used to do it. Yep. You remember some of those old spots? Yep. I said, all right. See you in the ring. That's it. 5-minute conversation. Get our 3 finishes down. That's it.
What was your relationship outside the ring like with Hulk Hogan?
Not much.
Did he keep to himself a lot?
Never. I don't think. Rob, I don't think there was a single time outside the ring that we ever ran into each other. He would be, and I don't knock this. He'd stay at the finest hotel in every city that you could probably stay at.
All right.
And I made good money working with WWF and Vince, but I was always in the back of my mind trying to save some money, so I'd be staying maybe at the Red Roof.
All right.
Now
you teamed with Jimmy Snuka a couple times. Why was that team never really pushed?
I don't know. I don't know why we were teamed, and I think we try to go with this Polynesian connection tag team theme, something like that. I know we'd maybe he didn't want us being tied up together as tag team, being in the same city. I would see Snuka occasionally on the road, but a lot of times he would be in another venue, another city, and I was in one. So instead of tagging us up.
Now, you were there for WrestleMania 1. How would you compare, WrestleMania 1, 2, and 3? Did you realize Vince was onto something pretty big?
I realized on WrestleMania 3. WrestleMania 1, of course, was at Madison Square Garden.
Right.
And that seemed to be, to me, it at that time, it still seemed to be very, very localized, WrestleMania 2 was with the 3-city location, right?
Right.
And we were out in LA, and then right after that show, we were flying to Australia for a week, and then turn right around and fly back. That WrestleMania, the only thing, and I remember I worked with Hercules Hernandez in that. Good match, hard match. Hernandez, Herc, he wanted to do so good. His heart, he wanted to try so hard. He just blew up, got an anxiety attack or something, got real stiff out there. God, it was like fighting a steel pole. I didn't like that WrestleMania. And also, I guess another reason is because right after the next day or that night, the midnight flight out of LA, we were going to Australia. And we were flying, here we are, the anxiety and anticipation of a big show, fly 18 hours. We flew from LA to Australia, landed in Sydney, which Sydney is on the East Coast. Let's say it's like landing in Philly here, okay?
All right.
Now that's flying from the United States, make a gas stop and a pickup and a drop off in Hawaii, down to Australia to Sydney, change planes, fly from Sydney to Perth. That's like flying Baltimore to LA, all right? Now this is after the big show. Fly, land in Sydney. Oh, we're here. No, we're going, what? We're going to Perth. Go to Perth, wrestle, after the show, get on a plane and fly back to Sydney. All this in the one day. Well, a day and a half that it took. It was time to where when we landed in Sydney and then fly another 4 hours across the country, like flying across the States to Perth, that we would land, it was like 5:30, their time in the afternoon, go wrestle, might as well take everybody straight to the building. It's 5:30 in the afternoon, 6 o'clock. Wrestle that show. After the show, bus everybody back to the airport because we're catching the midnight flight, Australia time, back to Sydney.
How'd you guys do it?
I know it. Can you imagine how to wrestle plus wrestle after the big show at WrestleMania 2.
I was going to ask this question later. I might as well ask it now.
Yeah.
Were drugs pretty rampant in the business at the time with the road schedule and stuff?
Oh, yeah. Oh, sure.
What are your personal views on drugs and stuff?
I'm not going to say that I'd be a liar if I didn't dabble every now and then, get a little hit of speed or something. You feel so run down being on the road, different time zones. That was pretty much the attitude of everybody. But for some reason in this country, you get athletes that are featured up there in the spotlight, and with the big money that they're being paid, and what is asked of them to be able to perform at 100% every time that they're out there in front of the crowd, whether it be football, basketball, baseball, or whatever. It just seems as though, I guess starting with the in the 70s, coming off, Woodstock and all that from the late 80s and all that, and then, guys would just take a little bit of this or a little hit of speed or something just to get up for the match. Just like I hear the football players do it right before the football game,
Right. What are your memories of working with the Honky Tonk Man?
Oh, Wayne Ferris. Wayne was I haven't seen Wayne in a while, but at that time coming into the WWF, like a lot of people, he was a yes sir, no sir type of guy. Yes sir, yes sir, yes. No sir. Okay, yes sir. He was okay guy, right? Yeah. It kind of, I'm sure you may ask this question later. I may answer it now. It kind of hurt my feelings at the time when I had dropped the belt to him.
I was going to ask you.
On TV. Yeah, it's and it sort of shocked all the other guys that were working for the company. I thought that I was going to have the Intercontinental belt for at least a year. At least that's what I was told. But I understand Vince's position. It's a business decision that he made, and that is, I wanted to have a couple of weeks off in and around the time that my Richie, my son, was going to be born. So being the Intercontinental Champion, Vince said that he could not leave that belt dormant for a couple of weeks. Well, my response back, I think it was my first response back to Vince in a defensive manner. I'm defending myself. I said, 2 weeks is too much to ask this belt to be, held dormant. I mean, sometimes we don't make it back to some of these major cities for over a month. Chicago, and then maybe you do Chicago in a month,
right.
4 weeks, or Philly, something like that. So I just said, well, I don't have a problem with dropping it to Wayne Ferris or the Honky Tonk Man. I don't have a problem. I said, I know I can take care of myself in the course of the match. I never had a problem on putting my shoulders down for anybody. If I knew that my main goal was to make sure that the match got taken care of, and if we had a great match, to me, it didn't matter who really won or lost.
Right.
It didn't matter. So, yeah, it was. I had some reservation because I did not know that much about Wayne Ferris. Didn't watched him work a little bit when he came in with the company. Thought some of the things that he was doing out there was kind of hokey. He'd get out there and swivel his hips and play the guitar, even though the man could never play a note. But he was okay guy, and he was trying to work his ass off and it just kind of surprised me. I think the main reason why it surprised me is here's a guy that's just come into the company for a couple of months, and there are several guys that are standing in line that have been working their ass off for Vince every single night, that heels that I thought that deserved the opportunity to have the Intercontinental belt rather than the Honky Tonk Man. And there was a couple of long faces in the locker room when everybody found out that Wayne was getting the belt. And also, I think there was a little bit of you could feel the thickness in the air with the attitude towards Wayne.
Right.
Here's this guy coming in with the glitter and this Elvis Presley haircut and guys that have just been working their butt off that I've been working with as his heels. You could see it.
Did your relationship change with Vince at the time? a little bit?
I think it did a little bit at that time. I think more than anything, Rob, I think my feelings were hurt. We were just coming off of WrestleMania 3. It wasn't a day that didn't go by that Savage and I, after that show, was either getting a note or a pat on the back, or every city that we'd go into that maybe one of the old timers that are now residing in that city, be Philly or Chicago or someplace, that would come in the locker room and say something to me and Savage about that match. We just got just so much notoriety from it. And it sort of made me feel like, well, I'm on top of the world with this company because just because of good hard work ethics, it has put us there, both Savage and I.
Right.
We are a fixed figure in this company. And it didn't, 2 months later, dropped the belt to the honky tonk. So I think more than anything, it hurt my feelings. And it hurt my feelings in a way that if you had a friend that hurt your feelings,
Right.
and how your outlook and attitude sort of changes towards your friend.
A lot of people say Vince is like that. He will make it seem like you're his best friend, like Hogan or somebody.
Yeah.
He'll keep you to a side, and then when he's done with you, he'll move on.
Yeah, and it's sometimes the moving on is kind of abrupt.
Right.
And I know I've seen guys go in that lot, and into every TV has his own designated office area. And some guys would be kind of really pissed off at Vince about what's happening or what the guy heard that's going to happen to him on TV or something like that. He's, man, I got to go talk to Vince. He'd be kind of, that guy'd be kind of stern about it. I got to talk to Vince. I don't like this shit. What they're going to be doing with me? I got to talk to Vince. Well, you see the guy walk over that goes into Vince's office there at the building. You can see he's pissed. But then after the discussion, the meeting, you'd see him come walking out with Vince's arm around his shoulders, and the guy, yeah, okay, Vince, yeah, no problem, yeah, okay. The guy ended up doing what he was pissed off about,
Right,
and he's smiling doing it, Oh yeah, Vince is he has a way, he has a demeanor, he has a way about yeah, you could hate him one day and love him the next.
Huh. What do you remember working with Jake Roberts?
Oh God, what a lot of fun. It's just too bad that the things that have happened in the course of his life have happened. I guess he's just, I don't know, maybe he just didn't have any self-esteem about himself, or maybe he just, he left his guard down too many times. But Roberts was a great worker. Great worker. Good timing. Convincing worker. Sort of tall and skinny, but throw a great punch, do a great knee. I don't think he did hardly anything off the top rope, but didn't have to.
So psychology.
Yeah, great timing, and a lot of fun.
Yeah. How did you wind up coming back to WCW, and why did you leave Vince?
Okay, I dropped the belt to the honky tonk, and I didn't have a problem with it. And I think it was right after that TV I had told Vince that it might have been right before or right after that TV. It was right, very close to that TV time, which I dropped the belt to Wayne. I said, Vince, I remember I was asking you, I wanted the 2 weeks off because we're getting very close to my son. Bonnie is going to, be giving birth. We're very, very close. So I said 2 weeks, but I said, I'm going to take 6 months. So I took 6 months off. I didn't come back till around late December, January. And that was getting ready for WrestleMania 4, which was the tournament for the belt.
City.
And that time I wasn't, during all this time I was not under any contract. Never signed a contract. So we came back and we were wrestling at Atlantic City, and I saw they're having rounds. And you keep brackets,
Right.
like wrestling brackets. You know, you keep advancing. Well, let me see. Okay, the first round I'm wrestling Valentine. Okay. And I'm just sort of talking to myself as I'm looking at the brackets on the wall in the locker room. I said, okay, second round I got Savage. All right. I think first round I probably go over Valentine. And then we all knew Savage was getting the belt in that night. So I said, well, he's getting the strap. So I'll probably return the favor back to Randy because he just dropped me the Intercontinental, the WrestleMania before. So I'll put him over in the second round. And that looks as though it's all I've got to do for the rest of the evening. Go to the second round and then I'm out of here. Well, Chief Jay Strongbow come up to me and he said, Ricky, you're going to be doing a job with Hammer. Now, I don't mind doing it for Greg. We worked together many times in the Carolinas. But I just, I said, what, Chief? He said, yeah. He says, first round, you're eliminated. You can go home early tonight, you know, that type of thing. And I started to see, you know, I didn't. At that time, I told Bonnie, and she went out to the concessions, and they had all the stuff out for all the other wrestlers, the T-shirts, headbands, and keychains, and all this kind of stuff. Nothing out on me. And what you would have thought that here I've come after being away for 6 months, and I've come back now. They just put the stuff out, you know, nothing. So. You know, Rob, I don't recall how long after that, but it was at that time I just said, I don't think I was there maybe 3 or 4 months, and I gave my notice. You know, I kind of got the feeling, I never had that much of a discussion with Vince, but I kind of got the feeling that he was maybe using me as an example or something.
Right.
He has a way of doing that.
When you went back to WCW, you know, you had your great match with Ric Flair at Chi-Town Rumble. Mm-hmm. Did you feel you had something to prove?
No. Honestly, no. No. I think the people the wrestling fans that watched the business, the fans that knew me in the Carolinas, then when I went to the WWF in the 80s, had that great match with Savage in 87. I don't think I had anything to prove. I think well, maybe this is in a sense of maybe I had something to prove. I think that when I went back in 89 and had those championship matches with Flair, was that maybe the fans and the people were wondering, did I still have it?
Right.
Maybe that's what I had to prove. Although that thought never crossed my mind, as though if I still had it. I knew I still had it. And it was a pleasure knowing that I was going to be able to come back into that company and be able to work with Rick. Wow, that was like, you know, the big gorilla off my back. This is going to be a breeze.
What are your memories of your third and final match with Rick? It was after the 2 out of 3 falls.
Yeah. I knew the schedule, the planning. I was going to win the belt in Chicago, have a rematch New Orleans, and then drop it back to him. I knew I was going to maybe have it for maybe 6 months. But I thought that afterwards, after dropping the belt to him, that I was going to have some rematches. I didn't know that they worked that angle with Funk right after my match. You know, I didn't know. Yeah, I didn't know it.
Where did you see yourself with Rick now being turned babyface?
No.
So I think you were programmed with Muda, I think. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Luger. Yeah.
Luger. I don't have a problem with Rick. You know, I know, you know, he's bounced back and forth, and you know, it's going to happen, whether you're working for the company or not. It's going to happen with him. Didn't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with that much of an ego with where I sit with the company. I could be the second man in the babyface list. Like I was second man with Dusty. I fell the second man in line with Flair. Second man in line, or maybe second or third, fourth man in line, bouncing back and forth, working with Vince, with Hogan always being number one. Right. So I never had a problem, or I would never go up to the promoter and say, you know, why can't you give me the chance to be number one for your company? I know if given the right opportunity that I could, you know, I could take it and run with it, you know, and work hard at it. But I didn't have that ego thing. You know, I didn't care if I was second or third in line. I know that if I, even though in the promoter's eyes, okay, we got Hogan first, and then at that time when I first came aboard, it was Snuka, Superfly. God, I can't remember at that time. It was back in '85, which some of the faces. Maybe I came aboard, I was like maybe third or fourth. Just happy to be with the company, happy to go out there and show my work. Happy to also to know that in most cases, that when I went out there and wrestled, usually that night I'd have the best match of the card. So even if it was so-and-so and so-and-so was first spot as a babyface, I knew that I could most times go out there and outshine it.
Right.
You know.
What are your memories of some of your matches with Great Muta?
Oh, God. Hard worker. God, he'd like to, I don't know. Sometimes these guys know that they get hooked up with me. They want to go 90 miles an hour.
Huh.
We don't have to go 90. We're going to go 40 minutes, sure, but we don't have to go 90 miles an hour for 40 minutes. I want to work a regular match, and there'll be times in which we have to go 90. Babyface making a comeback. Heel, you got to be there to feed me. But God, you don't have to go 90 miles an hour. We're doing a simple leapfrog spot or something, please. We'll be out of gas before the 20-minute mark, and there won't be a gas station in sight. That's a good story that I got with Savage. One time we were working, this is prior to WrestleMania, and we were working in Chicago. And Hogan was working an angle with Orndorff, Mr. Wonderful. And he had worked an afternoon show in Nassau. And they were going to fly Hogan and Orndorff private jet to Chicago. We were in the locker room, and we were the last main event. And the match after us would have been Hogan and Orndorff. Well, God, one of the agents, Black Jack Lanza.
All right.
God. He says, you guys got to go out. And we were, he said, Savage, he said, you guys go about 20 minutes. He said, when I walk out there and you see me with the pencil in my mouth, it's time you guys can go home. Lanza said that. He says, because Hogan and Orndorff have not arrived. We got the phone call from the air. They're in the private jet. They're coming. But you guys are going to have to go until you see me walk out there with the pencil in my mouth. It's just a funny thing. You see that mustache. And the guy walks all the way from the locker room up the aisle. He stands about 5 feet from the ring. Now, he's got to stand there until 2 or 3 things happen. The referee sees him standing there. But if the referee's so caught up in our match, he won't see him. I happen to see him standing there, or Savage. Or the referee happened to see him there. Standing there. Could have been standing there for 10 minutes, all we know, But the story goes, we went like 52 minutes. And Savage and I, we knew that we had a certain amount of time for the WrestleMania match. We heard it wasn't going to be any more than 20 minutes. So we're doing our match around the 20-minute mark, So we're going balls out for 20 minutes, and there's no Lanza. 30 minutes, no Lanza. 40 minutes, no Lanza. 50 minutes, we're no Lanza. So like the 52-minute mark, we finally see him. He could have been standing there for a few minutes, or he just walked out. We didn't know. Time to go home. Hogan and Orndorff are here. We got back to the locker room. I collapsed on the floor because we had done a 20-minute pace match but went 50-some minutes. I was so deprived of oxygen. I was looking over at Randy. Randy and I were both laying on the floor in the locker room. Just our skin was blue. Lack of oxygen. We were blue. Holy shit. Went to come in the locker room with still the pencil in his mouth. You guys got it out? Huh? Is it a pencil? Oh, God.
What are some of your memories of working with Terry Funk?
God. His man, you always follow the babyface. Is always supposed to follow the heel. His match would go from so serious to where you'd want to kill him because he'd be so stiff with you when he hit you with the chair. But he didn't care because if the opportunity came back for you to hit him with the chair, he'd nail me back, you know.
Right.
But sometimes you just get so pissed off at, why did you hit me in the head with that 2x4 like that? My God, feel the knot on my head, you know. And then sometime during the course of the match, you'd be laughing. You're trying to keep from laughing in the middle of the ring, you know, because he.
Right.
And then he'd fall over, you know, he'd be standing there going, and then boom, you know. Oh God, I don't know.
How different was it working with Lex Luger compared to Ric Flair?
You see this lamppost right here?
Yeah.
Right here? This is Lex Luger. I can't bend this thing. Right? Like working with a steel pole. And Flair, you know. But believe it or not, I worked with Lex. Literally worked with Lex. I'm trying to improve, what would you say, his character, his work style, you know?
Right.
And he came up to, after we had worked in a pay-per-view in Baltimore and had a fairly decent match. And believe it or not, he agreed to the finish. And I think it's because he just started to gain the respect for me. That's where you ran out of the ring, chased him up the ramp. You know, I was holding the chair and stuff like that.
Dash 89.
Yes. He often comes, whenever I do see him, he says, "Man, I'll never forget that Bash 89 match." He says, "It's one of the best matches I've ever had in my life," you know. But prior to that, knowing I was going to be working with Luger at that pay-per-view, we'd work several house shows, and I would help him. You know, I'd body slam me, and then after he'd body slam me, he'd be standing over me, and I'd say, "Go over," and I said, "Go work the crowd over on that side of the ring. Go work the crowd. Go, don't worry, I'll be here."
Right.
You know. And finally, he'd throw a spot in or something, and right in the middle of the spot, I'd tell him a spot, and I says, "Now, right after you do this, I want you to go back over to that same side that you're working that crowd." You know, he never knew how to work or be a heel. He just, like that. But work with the people, you know. Give me 3 clotheslines, and then go over there and climb out of the ring and get right up to the barrier and work that side that you're working. And I would work with him every night. And when it came to that bash, you know, the finish, he said, "Whatever Ricky wants to do is fine." I guess I gained the trust, you know. But he, you know, even to this day, he said to me, you know, those couple of months that you and I were, he says, "You taught me so much." And, you know, and he said, "You know something, Steamboat, is what's really funny is that you never worked a heel in your life, but you were telling me what to do in the ring as a heel." You know?
What was Sting like outside the ring?
Never hung out with Sting. The only way I would know Stinger is outside the ring is like if we were all gathering at the airport.
Right.
You know, just running. He's very cordial. I understood a lot of times he traveled by himself or something. He pretty much kept to himself. Kept to himself a lot of times in the locker room too.
Right. Now, what led you to depart WCW? Was it with Jim Herd contract negotiations? And
Yeah.
You basically.
Yeah. 89.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you wound up going back to Vince.
Yeah.
How did you feel that? Well, let's see. How did you feel about doing the fire blowing gimmick? I mean, were you against doing that?
If my memory serves me correct, Rob, I think that Vince, in going back at that time, was that 91?
Yeah.
Yeah. With the Dragon Con, you know.
Do you think it was punishment?
Well, let me say this first.
All
right. They had an art lady, and everybody was at that time Vince was coming into the age of costuming, and she had this art lady was drawing, you know, had a picture of me and doing this dragon with the wings and the tail and everything, and on paper it really looked cool. It really did. But when she got to making it up in this damn rubber rabbit tail, that damn thing must have weighed 100 pounds. You know, it was dragging down the aisleway, and the wings weren't bad. The wings were okay. But I, if my memory serves me correct, I was going to do the fire breathing stuff just on the big shows, the pay-per-views and stuff like that. And Vince saw it the first time, and he saw what it looked like on TV. Especially they turn off the house lights, and all of a sudden from the top of this, and I was really getting good at it.
Right.
Really shooting a blast. It'd be out there 10 feet. You know. He liked it so much that he convinced me, and Vince has a way of convincing people for the betterment of the company, betterment of the show, to do it every night in all the house shows.
Was it dangerous?
Nah, if you knew what you're doing. If you knew what you're doing. I was, he sent me down to Florida to a carnival act, and there was a guy that was blowing fire. He set up in a shopping center parking lot, one of those small time carny acts. Called him up, and I think Pritchard went with me. And the guy was a big Ricky Steamboat fan. He says, "You want me to teach?" And he was a young kid. He was like 25. He's been doing it since he was 15, 10 years. "You want me to teach Ricky Steamboat how to blow fire so he can do it?" "Oh, I'll be happy to. I'll be happy to." So they sent me down there. And they had not put the big top up, the big tent. Well, the biggest tent that they had for the parking lot.
Right.
Okay. And he was so excited about showing me how to do it. It was kerosene. You put kerosene in your mouth. He lit his torch. And we're standing out in the parking lot, and it's a little windy that day. A little windy. We're down there in Florida, and it's a little windy, a little breezy. And he's watching his torch, and he's watching which way the flames are going. Because what's he want to do? He wants the wind to be coming from his back, blowing away from him.
Right.
And just as he got that torch and he stuck it, you stick it about, a foot from your mouth, and you blow the kerosene to the fire, which ignites it. Just as he blew, the wind shifted and he blew everything back in his face. Now this guy is running around the parking lot with his face on fire. Kerosene sprayed back in his face, and he's running around, patting it out. Okay, finally he gets it out. I look over at Pritchard and I said, "This guy's a pro. This guy's been doing it for 10 years. Now you expect in a day to teach me, and then I'm going to be doing this at that time for the big shows." I said, "Look at him running around out there in the parking lot with his face on fire."
Right.
I said, "This is ridiculous. I'm not going to do this." And he came back, and what was his name? I think his name was Bill something. He said, No, Ricky, everything's cool. Look, see, everything's fine. Everything's cool. Well, the next day, he had all these big water blisters all over his face, just red. But he taught me how to do it. Didn't like the idea of having to do it every night. I didn't mind doing it for the big shows, but what the heck? I got doing it every night.
Right. Was it an insult, do you think, that you were placed on opening matches again after you just came off incredible matches with Ric Flair?
Yeah.
What was your relationship like with Vince at the time? Was it basically just business as usual and,
Well, I had thought that was in 91, had flown up to Connecticut on 2 occasions to have some meetings at his house.
Right.
And I thought we buried the hatchet and shook hands. He promised me a main event spot. I understood that coming back to the company, he said, "I'm going to start you off here and build you back up." He said, "It'll probably take about 3 months." Well, here it was 10 months later, Rob, and I'm still doing opening matches. And after 3 months, I would go to Vince and say, "Well, we're going to do a little angle, a little program or something, He said, "Ricky, we're going to do it next TV." Well, 2 weeks later, we do, TV come around, ask him. So, every 2 weeks I'd ask him after the 3rd month. And then we're into the 10th month, and I just call him up. Where was I? I think I was flying from Charlotte. I think we landed somewhere in the Midwest. It might have been Kansas City or St. Louis. I got off the plane, went to a payphone, and called him up and gave him my 2 weeks' notice. got back on the plane, and finished my commitment for the 2 weeks.
So there was never ever talk of putting you and Savage back together for a program or anything? No.
No.
And Flair came in too, I think it was around that time.
Right.
So.
And he had told me, he said, God damn it, Steamboat. He said, just when I get my butt up there with the WWF and Vince, you leave.
Wow. What was the difference between the two eras when you were there the first time compared to the second time? What differences were there?
Oh, well, funny you asked that question, Rob, because that was immediately brought to my attention with my meetings with Vince. Oh, Rick, we are a much different company. And it's 91. We are a much different company now. We are much more professional. All those things that we didn't know what we were doing in the 80s, we are completely ironed out. Everything's working like clockwork. I've got my people in the right place. It's just so much smoother now. You'll see. And I don't know. I was never privy to being on the inside of that company. 99% of the wrestlers were always on the outside. You're on the outside looking in. You don't know how this mechanical difficulty was this or that. I really didn't see that much of a difference.
Did you see Shawn Michaels as a future star? Did you see him coming up?
All right. My immediate gut was I was surprised to see him as Vince's number one guy, world champion. I didn't know Shawn that well. The question that always came to me was, I'm wondering if he can pull it off. Fans. I guess in due time, he proved to me that he could.
Right.
But in the beginning, I was surprised and shocked and had in the back of my mind, could he pull it off?
What are your memories of some of your matches with Rick Rude? I think that was like the last guy you worked with before you left.
Hard worker, very opinionated, not to where he liked things done his way. Many times I didn't mind. I had a good business sense, okay? But a lot on some situations, you would have to take a deep breath and just take a back door. That if you on this situation he wanted it done this way, bottom line he was looking out for Rude. Okay, he was looking out for Rick Rude. I knew it. I felt it. But no sense of arguing about it because you're not going to get anywhere trying to change it. If it was a situation that he came up with that presented something to do with me or maybe something to do with us, it could be changeable. But if it was something that he wanted to do in the ring or in the course of a match or a pay-per-view show or something, that you knew in your heart that this is a Rick Rude thing, you have no chance in hell on getting it changed.
Right.
It's going to be step by step, this little scenario,
Now, I heard from other people that Vince McMahon claims that one of the reasons that you left the WWF is because you didn't want to do a job to the Undertaker. Is there any truth to that at all?
I could see Vince saying it that way. When I gave my notice, I told you I stepped off the plane,
Right.
got back on, gave my notice. My last shot was a TV shot. And Mike Rotundo.
Right.
What was he? The
IRS?
IRS. They're filming 2 shows on TV. And in both shows, one to work with the IRS, the other work with the Undertaker. Both shows, they wanted me to do a stretcher job. Carry me out in a stretcher. And I said no to that. I said I didn't have a problem. I said I'll put Mike over in the middle. I'll put my shoulders down. I said I'll put my shoulders down for the Undertaker, right in the middle. But number one, Vince, if you do a stretcher job, and I don't know which guy I was working with first, Rotundo or Undertaker, But if I do a stretcher job in the first hour, and the place is sold out, you got 20,000 people here, and you see they take me out in a stretcher, what are they going to think of our business? Because it had not gotten all that kind of exposure like it's been getting, in the last 5 years. This was 91. What would they think if they saw Steamboat get back in the ring for the second hour? Just right 20 minutes earlier, he got taken out in a stretcher. I'm not wanting to do that to the business. And I sort of also said it this way, as maybe it would help Vince persuade him. And I also said, I wouldn't want to do it to your company. A little shot there, but a logical one, right? I wouldn't want to do it to your company, Vince. God, But I said, I'll put my shoulders down in the middle for him. Any way you want. 1, 2, 3, beat me. Next hour, 1, 2, 3, beat me. But I'm not going to do a stretcher job.
All right. When you left, was it on good terms, or you think?
No, right then he said, if you're not going to do stretcher jobs, you're terminated right now. Get out of here. Leave. I said, okay.
That was pretty much it.
Yeah.
Wow. How'd you wind up getting back into WCW?
Phone call. Yeah.
Memories of teaming with Dustin Rhodes.
Dustin's a good kid. Yeah. Tried to get along with everybody. Very conscious about his work. Worked very, 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 very hard. I think in the back of his mind, he always felt that he had some shoes to fill, like with his dad. But, his dad was limited in what he could do in the ring. Dustin, as young as he was, he already was destined. You could see that he was going to be a good worker.
I think that was some of his best matches when he teamed with you.
Yeah.
What was your relationship with Bill Watts?
A lot of respect for each other. Respected, but he respected me. Kind of nice, felt good. Respected Bill. Bill was, basically from the old school. He got a time, he wanted baby faces and the heel to be separate.
Right.
I think there were times that even in booking flights, if there was enough flights going to a particular city, backup flights, he would have heels maybe going on an 8:00 flight, and baby faces going on a 9:30. Very protective of the business.
Right.
Do not ride with each other. Be careful, even if you're being seen at the gym, working out at the same time with each other. So.
What are some of your memories of your series with Barry Windham and Arn Anderson?
Yeah. I love Arn. Great worker. Also a good guy. If you're his friend, he's another guy that'll go to bat for you. And I could give Arn a call and say, Arnie, I'm stuck here in Baltimore. I need some help. He would find a way. He would. One of those type of guys. Great, a lot of fun. Good psychology. He's a good worker. Great, good timing. Got a great mind for the business. Good finish man. A lot of guys in the locker room, if they were having a problem putting a finish together, Arn would do this, and this, and that. Yeah, light bulb would come on. The guy said, "Gee, why didn't we think of that?" Thanks.
Right.
Just great mind.
How about Cactus Jack? Your memories of working with Cactus?
Every time you bring up these names, I always get the feeling that every single one of these guys would go to bat for me. Every single one of these guys would work their ass off for me. Cactus the same way. But he's off camera. He's a great guy anyway, right?
Yeah.
Right. And but they I don't know why. That's I don't know, my reputation or whatever. It just I'm working with Steamboat for the next couple of months. Oh God, great. But that's a good feeling. That's a real good feeling, Rob. And I know I rode with guys for so many years, and they get in the car and they're sitting in the back seat and they'll say, "Hey, Steamer." I'll say, "What?" God, I had to go to the office today. They told me I'm going to be working with so and so and so and so. Holy Jesus, do I dread this?
Right.
That's the other side of the coin, right? But
how did you wind up getting paired with Shane Douglas? How did that come about?
Shane. I'm pretty sure Shane didn't go to the office and said, would you consider or take into consideration to team me up with Steamboat? I know I didn't.
Right.
I think maybe the company was just looking at
You guys together.
just a couple of baby faces that make up a good baby face tag team.
Right.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun with Shane too. He would always tell me, he says, God, I learned so much from you tonight. I said, what are you talking about? He said, believe it or not, when I'm standing in the apron, I'm like, I'm watching how you work, I'm watching, God, look at that facial expression. Wow, why did he move his leg that way? Oh man, look at the way he's moving his hand. He'd tell me this, we'd be riding back or something,
Right.
And then after I found out that he was so attentive, then I started doing more. He still watched me work in the ring, but then we'd start doing like classroom stuff on the way home in the car. If we had a 100-mile trip or 200-mile trip or something, we'd start talking about timing, ring psychology, that aspect of the business. And Shane's a bright guy. I mean, he's intelligent. He's a smart cookie. He's got a good IQ, so he picked up things very well, very well. Him and I still talk. Every couple of months or so, we may call each other. I would have to say that he probably calls me more than I do return his calls. And whenever they were coming into Charlotte to film TVs, he'd always call me ahead of time, and we'd always meet for dinner. Robert, I could probably tell you, of the thousands of wrestlers that I've met over my entire career, I could probably just give you a handful, 5, on guys that I could say that were truly there for me. You know what a nip and tuck business this is,
Right.
Backstabbing, who can talk behind whose back to get that position.
Right.
But there's probably just a handful of guys. Shane's one of them. Arn's one of them. Nikita's one of them. Guys that I know that if I was in trouble, they're just a phone call away. Flair's one of them too. Yeah.
What are your memories of your series with Steve Austin and Brian Pillman? Blonde.
They see the same. I give you the same answer.
Right,
it was
right.
great. Everybody had their own style, and it was sometimes it was very refreshing if you're working with one group of guys, and then all of a sudden you're finding out you're going to be working with another pair of guys. I'll tell you a story. We were wrestling up in northern Georgia. Little spot show. Might have been 1,800 people, 2,000 people in this. We were either in a high school gym or an armory. But anyway, we were down and below the basement was where the locker rooms were. And they had the heels and the baby faces separated. And we didn't know this. But during the intermission, they came out and they made an announcement that, ladies and gentlemen, there's about 2,000 people there.
Right.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to be able to make it home, leave now. There is a blizzard coming in.
Huh.
Now, we're sitting down in the locker room. Only one main event, which was us.
Right.
It was Shane and I against Pillman and Austin. Didn't know about the announcement, nothing. All the other guys, of course, as soon as they finished their match, they showered up and left. So we're just sitting in during the intermission. After the intermission, we knew the place was sold out.
Right.
We go out there. There are 12 people sitting in this place. And they're all from the same family, sitting in that one ringside row. Why? Because their house was across the street from the building. Right? And we walked out. It was a morgue, right? The place is empty. There's just 12 people sitting in this one row. What is going on? And then the referee says, well, didn't you hear? No, nobody. I said, Shane and I have been sitting down there in that basement by ourselves in the dark through the intermission and everything. What's going on? He says, well, there's a big blizzard in here now. You're kidding. No, they came over the intermission and made the announcement. Everybody left, went home. Except for this family right here, and they said they live across the street. Well, this just tells you who we are. Here, Shane and I and Pillman and Austin were in front of those 12 people, that family of 12. We went out there and wrestled for 40 minutes. We had a blast.
That's awesome.
The flow of the match. And that's what I'm saying. That's the part that I missed. You you get into a match that is just so much fun. We had all seriousness involved. We had a couple of laughter things involved, but that's the time of the whole deal that makes it all worthwhile, you know?
Do you think that series of matches ended prematurely?
No. You know, the tag team with Shane and I and Pillman and Austin?
Right.
No.
What happened the night of the pay-per-view, I guess, where you teamed with Brad Armstrong under the mask? That was the cage match.
God, I'm lost with that one.
I think it's when Shane left the company, or Shane wasn't going to be there, and they had Brad wear the mask pretending to be Shane.
Oh, yeah.
No, I think it was Brad Armstrong. Maybe it was Tom Zen.
Tom Zen.
Yeah.
Was it Diablos? The Diablos?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that you bring it back. My light bulbs are starting to come back on. Jeez, I thought that was so damn goofy. God, I didn't want to get involved with that.
Now, when you and Rick got
Going to
together
the
again,
Diablos, went and beat some bros and stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, God. If you want to ask me, was any times in my career I had some embarrassing moments? That was one of them. Walking out there with the cucaracha. When he beats some, what the heck is this? Get this gimmick Hawaiian guy wearing this Mexican sombrero and stuff. Man, oh man.
what are your memories working with Vader?
Ooh. Man, you gotta watch out for Vader.
Steph?
Yeah. Good guy though. He's big heart. I mean, if he liked you, he'd take the bullet for you. You know?
Right.
He really would. He'd take the bullet for you. He'd jump in front. And it's not Vader's fault. You know, he played professional football for the Rams. You know, he was a center till he blew his knee out. But to play any kind of professional sport, it takes that little bit of extra, that edge, that little bit of more testosterone. You know, whatever it is, he would get caught up in a match, and he would tell me, he said, Ricky, I never ever seen anything like it when I'm working with you. I get to work with so and so and so, but working with you, these people want to kill me. You know, they're standing out there threatening me with the knives and stuff and holding chairs up. They want to, you know, it's just because the way I was selling for them. You big 450-pound man kicking your butt all over the ring, you know. And I had my occasional fighting back and give little, what I call hope spots and stuff like that. But the problem with Vader is that he would get so wrapped up in it. Adrenaline rush. I mean, his eyes would turn red, be like the devil would possess him. And then he'd really want to start nailing you.
Right.
You know, that's cool. Calm down, please. You know, he come and give you the big Vader in the corner and just kill you. Big splash off the top rope. And here's a guy, 400 pounds, doing this hat flip off thing off the, incredible. But you'd be scared for your life, especially if you got into that mindset.
Right.
Uh-oh, click. Oh, shit. Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, look out. He's going to, you know. And you really, really had to look out. Yeah.
What happened the night of your last match against Steve Austin? Was it Lancaster, California, or Virginia?
I hurt my back in Roanoke.
Okay.
But I finished the rest of the tour, which was probably about another 3 dates or something like that after that. And all we did for those 3 days was just walk and talk. Just did a lot of walking and talking to finish up.
Basically, you had like 2 months left on your contract, I think, at the time, and they just released you or something like that. It was like
they terminated me.
Everything you did for the company, you had to.
Yeah, and the boys couldn't believe it. They said, "God, Rick, you know, we've got a lot of dickheads in the business. You know, they're out for a whole year, yet they're still getting their money each week from the company. You know." Or they can't do this, or they hurt their elbow or something. And here it is. You weren't a dickhead to these guys.
Right.
And you only had 2 months, and you said all the years you put in for them. And I got hurt. I felt like, why? Because I really hurt on the job, you know, working for your company. And they just, I'll never forget, the word they used was terminated. I'm the Terminator.
Huh.
I got terminated. And that was another one of those kind of moments in which you kind of, your heart was Oh, it was hurting. Your gut would just twist, you know. Jesus.
You were the U.S. champion, I think, at the time as well.
Yeah.
Right? Mm.
Yeah.
How do you feel about them advertising for a pay-per-view that they knew that you were not going to be at? They still advertised you.
Well, you know, I think anybody
Nature of the
would.
business.
Yeah, it's the nature of the business, but then it's also wrong to do that.
Right.
You're swerving the fans. It hurts the company, but it also hurts me. You know, it's just the credibility of Ricky Steamboat with a no-show on a pay-per-view.
Could you come back? You want to switch tapes?
And let's say a jobber's working, they're doing an opening match. Maybe a jobber's working another jobber. And they would come back to the locker room and they'd come up to me and say, God, Ricky, I said, what? He says, well, this one fan got all over me out there. It's the first time it's ever happened. And she told me it's because this past weekend I worked with you on TV and I almost beat you.
Huh.
You know? And he said, God, it was great. It had nothing to do with the guy that I was working with. You know,
Right.
She hated my guts because I almost beat you last week on TV. You know, but that's some of the stuff that's being missed in our business. You know, God, that's.
If you were able to, could you come back for at least one more match?
Yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Heartbeat.
I mean, are you physically up for it? I mean, or is it something?
No, my back is killing me.
That's what my question was. Would you be able to actually step back in the ring today and wrestle one more match?
I couldn't do the way
Right.
Steamboat used to work.
Right.
Very, very limited on my bones and stuff. You know.
If you could come back one more time, who would it be with? Correct?
Yeah.
Flair?
Yeah. Okay. I get that question asked too. My two favorite matches, Savage or Flair.
Right.
Come back and work with Savage or Flair. It's Flair.
Mm.
You know. I think I could still do. If I had a little more ring time, like 2 or 3 weeks, I think him and I could still do an hour.
Wow.
Wouldn't be the speed. Wouldn't be. I think the intensity would maybe be there. Definitely our hearts would, because we're just so competitive with each other about when we work with each other. But I think the amazing factor is that if we did do it and went out there for an hour, everybody in the wrestling world would just be in awe of the fact that we did an hour. You know.
Who are some of the guys that you still keep in touch with?
Since Shane.
Right.
Speak to Flair maybe 3 or 4 times a year. God, what is his name? Out of Atlanta. Used to be a black referee. Then he was
Teddy Long?
Teddy Long.
Teddy Long.
Right.
Believe this or not, guys, out of all the guys that I told you I know throughout the years of wrestling, he's the only one that calls me Christmas Day and wishes me a Merry Christmas.
Huh.
Teddy Long.
Wow.
And of course, a lot of the guys, Christmas Day is a big wrestling day, but most of the times it's been very local. So the guys at least spend half of the day at home, you know. He's the only one that calls. And I get that phone call every Christmas morning. And last year I was out working and I was blowing leaves off the patio. And I remember Richie came up and says, telephone, Dad. I knew who it was. He has not missed a lick for, God, the last 5 years that I've been out of the business. The last 5. I said, you know, Teddy, damn you. He says, you're the only guy that calls me.
Huh.
You know. And he says, I never forget you, Steamer. I went to bat for him one time. You know, they were going to get rid of him or something, either in the manager capacity, and I got him to hang on to be a referee, or get rid of him as a referee capacity, and I got him to hang on to put him in the manager. But I got him to be able to stay with the company.
Right.
And from that, things got better for him, and his paychecks got better. He says, I'll never forget you went to bat. I didn't really go to bat, honestly. Teddy, not honestly, didn't really, no. I just put in a couple of good words for you, and just let it go from there. And I guess they took that in consideration.
Have you ever been approached to book any of the territories?
No.
No.
Wouldn't want to either.
Why is that?
I think for so many years my work ethics are so etched in stone that I would maybe have a problem with. I'd like for it to be done this way.
Mm.
Or we would like for it to be done this way, and it's just not going to get done this way.
What are your thoughts on today's wrestling and the current product?
I feel for the guys. even the guys that are in with the major companies on a full-time basis, the newer guys especially, not The Rock or Triple H or those guys. You know, they were around when I was around. Okay, maybe I'm 5 or 10 years prior to them, but they understood the timing and that. These newer guys that are coming into the business, it's hard for them to go out there and show ring psychology and timing when in today's business, a lot of it is just geared for TV and pay-per-view. You're limited to what, 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes at the most in a match. It isn't like you go to the house shows every night and you put in your 20 or 30. And that's the major difference that I see is that this talent, this generation of new talent, as the Flairs and the Savages and the Bret Harts, as we pass the torch to this generation of workers, they truly are not going to be able to experience the art form of what it means to know timing is right to do this. As timing is right for the babyface to start make his comeback. Timing is right for the heel to start getting some heat. You know, ring psychology, and I try to explain this to the guys that I'm talking to at this wrestling seminar that I'm doing, this workshop, that you'll understand what psychology is about, and psychology plays a major factor on the flow of the match. You know, even to this day, and I used this yesterday, I said, babyface working with the heel, babyface working on the arm. Working on the arm, working on. Do a couple of nice spots off the arm, get back on the arm. The heel stops you just for a second, throws you in the turnbuckle, tells you to move, right? Babyface goes in the turnbuckle, here comes the heel, he charges with the big knee, you move out of the way, he goes down, right? What does the babyface do? He goes to the leg now. All that first 3 or 4 minutes that he's working on this arm and coming off with nice spots off the arm and all this kind of stuff, working hard on it, shit can it, because now you went to his knee, you know? Right. And then I guess if you continue working the leg, and let's say you do a spot in which the guy, the heel bends over for a backdrop and you do it like, a face bump. Right. What are you going to do? Go to the headlock? You see. Right. They're lost. The guys are going, yeah, we see that even in today's major venue, the WWF, you see this with some of the talent, the earlier matches, the guys that are not the main event. But you have to think that the company has taken enough time to look at these guys and say, they're good enough, they know enough, that now we can feature them on our show. Well, I look at that and I go, I pick it apart, and I see this. Why did he work the arm? Oh, no, geez. The guy comes in with a big knee. Get back in the arm, get back in the arm. Because everybody that is watching can relate. This babyface was smart enough to get back on that arm. Why? Because he just spent 3 or 4 minutes working the heck out of it. Oh, shit, he grabbed the leg. What are you doing? Right. Now you're starting from all over again to try and tell this story. Yeah, the art form is being lost out there, Robert. And it's not these guys' fault. It's just that they don't have the opportunity to work the way we used to work,
All different, towns and different guys.
Well, how about the different territories?
Right.
You could work Florida territory, and you go out there and watch the match, and you would watch all these different characters, right? And you'd work that territory for a year. Next thing you know, you go to Texas, right, and you watch those guys work. Wow. Everybody has their own style, Basically, everything's the same. A backdrop's a backdrop, an arm drag's an arm drag, thing off the top rope, thing off the top rope. It's all the same. But it's the body language, it's the movement that makes everything so different. Don't you think, Rob, that you've got a card of 9 matches? Everything's the same in all the matches. But why do we have a card of 9 matches?
For a variety of different talent.
Right, because everybody has their own little character, right? Everybody's developed. But when this guy's in for a backdrop, the same thing happens in the second match. Same thing happens in the third match. Fundamentally, the mechanics of the business stays pretty much the same, top to bottom.
It's the characters, the way they sell.
Right, yeah.
Right, storyline.
But And you only get that through ring time and stuff like that. And I think a lot of that is going to be hard to for this generation to understand. They are so wrapped up in everything being so choreographed, nonstop. Boom, 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 boom.
It's all high spots.
Yeah. But if you look at the show, prior to the Triple H's or The Rock and Undertaker and Mankind, and those guys.
Right.
But everything prior to those guys, all their stuff, it's all the same. And before, like I said earlier, you can have a 9-match lineup on the card, and it would be all different. But on the big major show, there'll be 2 or 3 matches that they're all identical.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on David Flair? Have you seen any of this stuff? Do you think they should have kept him off TV for a while, sent him to a small territory, then brought him on TV in WCW?
Well, I don't know what they did with him prior to bringing him on WCW.
I think they were just going to use him for one time, and then I guess the company, the office liked him. And they wanted to keep him on TV. But I think he wanted to actually take himself off TV and go work some small territories first and learn the business better.
Learn how to work.
Yeah.
I didn't. To be honest with you, in the last couple of years, I never watched. I may be channel surfing, and on a Monday Night Raw would come on, and I'd watch it for a few minutes. But then I didn't watch a whole lot of wrestling because of what I just said. The business and the art form is being lost, and it's just become a high spot show. But the few times that I've caught David Flair on, I was really surprised that they would let him on there, especially Rick would let his son on there, understanding the work ethic of Flair. He is such a professional when it comes to working in the match, working in the ring, dropping the knee on your forehead. Just such a professional that I was surprised that he would let his son, with as much ring time that his son has had, go out there and be on national television. I didn't know, you just told me, that David was the one that actually wanted to pull himself off TV and go work a territory to learn how to. That's very commendable. Because in today's world, you got guys that want to get on TV and get that paycheck. They can't even work,
Right.
They want to get on, pay me first and I'll learn about working later.
Right.
Here's David Flair, which is the opposite attitude. I want to go out and work, And understanding that he's coming from a background of Ric Flair. That's his dad. But I just, if that was true, I can't understand why that maybe.
That's what I heard. I don't know how true it is. But that's what I heard.
Well, it could be very well true. If that was true, I don't understand why Rick just wouldn't put his foot down and say, "Hey, give my boy, let's put him out there for 2 or 3 months." I mean, whatever you have in mind to do with him, it can wait a couple of months.
Right.
But he needs to get some ring time in him,
Right before the company folded, they actually sent him down to a territory. I think it's NWA Wild Side or something like that.
Really?
Yeah. So, I don't know. Your thoughts on The Rock?
I don't know The Rock very well. I've met him on a few occasions. I know that he is his dad, Rocky Johnson's son. I don't know The Rock well enough. I try to judge people as I know them off camera.
Right.
I only really know him as what wrestling fans see him. I would think that he's an okay guy, I think he's doing a hell of a job.
Right.
He has a good fan presence about him, and he knows how to work the people, I think his interviews are great, okay?
What about Steve Austin?
I'm glad for Steve, really. I haven't talked much with him, but I remember Austin when in the WCW days.
Right.
Probably, I don't know, making $75,000 a year, $1,500 a week.
Right.
And this is when he was with Pillman, tag team. All right. And look what he's making now.
Right.
Yeah, he's hard worker.
Were you shocked when you heard about the deaths of Brian Pillman and Rick Rude?
Yeah. I didn't. What did Pillman? The hurt his ankle, hurt his foot. Right, you got in a wreck or something?
Yeah,
Humvee.
Huh?
His Humvee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he was on a lot of pain pills and trying to. I think the boys were saying maybe he came back a little too early.
Yeah.
And then drinking alcohol, mixing with the pain pills is what did him in. Yeah. I do the Pillman Memorial thing with Les Thatcher.
Right.
I think this year will be my 4th one, coming up this. I think it's August. Yeah.
Is your son a pro wrestling fan at all, or
No.
no? Race cars.
Racing cars, loves it.
Is there anyone that you saw coming up that you thought had a world of potential but never made it?
All right, I'll try and answer that, but let me go back. You said, my son, was he ever a wrestling fan? No. Racing cars, yes. He loves watching NASCAR racing. But what is funny, what is peculiar, is that when his buddies, they all watch wrestling. They all love The Rock, and Steve Austin. And here's my son that doesn't, and they look over at me and he says, "But your dad's Ricky Steamboat, and you don't watch, How do you figure this out,
Right.
I guess because I don't watch it. And I have my own personal reasons, because it's just become a bump city type of. Now, if Triple H is on when I'm channel surfing, or The Rock's on when I'm channel surfing, or like I watched that match, the last match on the last show with Flair and Sting, they're doing some stuff. It could be Flair was wearing a T-shirt. I said, "Oh, come on, guy.
Right.
Yeah, you got a little chubby, so what? It's your last. You're 50-some years old. It's your last match." But I'll stay and watch that. Right? And then I'll sort of just hang on to see what's coming on next. And if it's just a couple of young kids and I'm sure they work their ass off. They work their hearts out. And they're going as hard as they can go trying to make a point here. But it just doesn't interest me. So then I'll flip it. But that's it. It's funny with the kids. They love watching them guys, And, but who was a, God. Oh. I don't know. I'm going back a few years. The guy that comes to my mind is the Guerreros. I know Chavo, the oldest brother.
Right.
Who's it now? Hector?
Eddie Guerrero.
Eddie's with WWF right now. And
I think his brother just got signed, maybe developmental deal.
Yeah.
Chavo Jr. So.
Yeah. The Guerreros. They do some of the Mexican stuff, which is good high flying, high spot stuff, but they have Americanized it.
Right.
Yeah.
Are you surprised at how open the business is today?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But it hasn't. You can't dispute their numbers, can you?
No.
I mean, WWF pay-per-view numbers, TV numbers. Yeah.
Are you disappointed that you never had a major run as a heel?
Yes. Really?
Right.
I think it was in '91. I had talked with Pat Patterson, with Vince. I didn't talk with Vince. I talked with Pat.
Right.
And I said, "Pat, I've been in I think at that time I've been in the business for maybe like around 15 years, 16 years. I said, I have never worked heel. I've always been a babyface. I feel myself starting to get stale. I said, Pat, you've worked both ways. Flair's worked both ways. I mean, there's so many guys that have worked both ways." And I said that. Also going through that time in my career in '91, wearing that Dragons outfit, doing opening matches, being promised a main event spot, never coming up, on and on and on. Maybe I was searching for a different excuse to do something different just to help please Rick, Steamboat. I said, I want to work a program or something as a heel before I finish my career. Just so I can, one time, just tell that person in the front row to shut up and sit down.
Right.
Instead of looking at them and giving them the thumbs up and the, oh shit. But Pat looked at me and he said, "You know something, Ricky? You have been through the companies that you've worked for and the TV exposure that you've had and the fans that you have. You could go out there, let's say, at that time, with Bret Hart.
One of my next questions.
Yeah. And take a chainsaw and cut his head off on TV, and the fans wouldn't believe it. You are a babyface and always will be. This is Pat Patterson. And never, ever, you'll ever work a heel. And then he said, I'm also telling you, don't, if you ever leave this company to go work for, don't ever try to work as a heel. It's just, there's so many things in our business that we can do variables with.
Right.
He said, and a lot of people are smart to the business and this and that and on and on and on. But don't work as a heel because he says he thought it would hurt my career more than anything.
Right.
So I never got the chance. How many guys do you know that worked a good length of time? I'm not talking about guys that maybe stayed in the business for 2 years or 3 years or 5 years. That started off either as a heel or a baby and stayed that way through 15 or 20 years.
It's hard to even.
Never worked. You know, you got Bruno who started off as a heel. Hogan worked heel.
Right, right.
Yeah, and they even worked heel WCW.
Right.
You know, Hollywood Hogan. Flair's gone back and forth. How about Shane Douglas? He worked heel with ECW.
And Sting was a heel in UWF. So.
Yeah. You know, maybe that's a good do a little
Those
research.
storylines change now. Every
Yeah.
week,
Yeah.
back and forth.
Yeah.
Sometimes change back and forth 3 times a year now.
How would you rate Ricky Steamboat as a worker on a scale from 1 to 10?
God, as I think this, I get variables that pop into my head. I know how hard I worked, you know. Somewhere between an 8 and a 9.
Okay. Also, you mentioned Bret Hart a little bit ago.
Yeah.
What are your memories of working with Bret? I think you had a couple matches with him.
Yep. A man of excellence when it comes to what to do in the ring. He would definitely say that I don't think that would be a right thing to do in the ring because it just doesn't make sense for the match that the story that we're trying to tell.
Right.
Worked hard, worked really hard. Didn't know Bret much outside the ring. You know, he stopped to have a beer, you know, for lunch or dinner. Never would meet to go to the gym. He pretty much almost all the time traveled by himself. You know, I never would see him. The only time I would ever see Bret would be at the building. But as you notice, when you ask me these questions about this person, that person, most of the times that you're asking me about this particular guy
Right.
is around the same era that I came along.
Right.
And my answers are predominantly staying the same.
Right, right.
Hard workers, very conscious about the business, you know, had good Jake the Snake Roberts, good timing, you know, and all that too.
Are you surprised that a lot of your peers, such as Hogan and Flair, are still around today? They might not be active, but they're still in the business.
No. They loved it, you know. Obviously, Hogan or Flair probably do not need the income.
Right.
You know, they must love the business. Sometimes I like the business. I had some sour notes in my career. I don't look back and say, God, I wish this would this. I had a good career.
I was going to ask you if you have any regrets.
Yeah. No. No, I had a good career. My work ethic, I think, kept me at my level. Once I reached that level, there was no denying that. I think promoters or agents or bookers or something would see that. And they knew that is Steamboat the kind of guy that if we were to give the ball to, would he score a touchdown for the company or would he fumble on the 5? And I think more cases than none that I would score for him. You know.
Do you have any good rib stories
Um,
that you've seen, or I don't know if you pulled any? Or...
You know, guys like Mr. Fuji or somebody would put super glue in the guy's door locks.
All right.
You've heard of that.
Yeah.
Chain around the car.
I didn't hear that one.
Chain all the way around the car. Over the roof, through the door handles. Now I'm going back to the 70s when the door handles were the old style door handles, you know. This is in the Carolinas. Chain all the way through, all the way around, big old padlock. Yeah, they have bolt cutters to cut. They put M80s on the distributors, you know. Guy would go in and start the car up, the distributor would blow up. Guys would go out there and the car would be up on blocks, all the wheels and tires are gone. And actually the guy that would be doing the rib would take the wheels and tires. So if we were in Raleigh, your wheels and tires are in Charlotte. You know, I don't recall who did. Johnny Valentine did a real bad rib, and that's he crapped in somebody's wrestling bag. That's the old man.
Right.
He put some lighter fluid in this guy's inhaler.
I heard about that.
Harley Race.
Yeah, Harley Race.
I think.
Yeah, the guy came back with a gun
Yeah.
Yeah.
and blew holes through, I think, Johnny's bag.
Yeah.
The guy would come in after every match, and he'd get, and he's shooting lighter fluid in his mouth.
Did you have any experiences with Eric Bischoff ever? Any business dealings with him when he was in the company? Well, maybe he didn't have power at the time.
Wasn't he in the 90s,
Yeah.
92-ish, 3-ish?
He could have been just doing announcing TV. So.
Yeah, production and stuff.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. I guess in closing, do you want to say anything to your fans that are watching this videotape?
Yeah. There's I see this with being around different types of celebrities, and now being more so around Winston Cup drivers and NASCAR racing and stuff, because my son's involved with racing. And I saw it, hanging around with basketball players and football players. And I saw it in our business, in wrestling. And that is, it happens. And I don't know if it's human nature or it's just a natural thing to where fans would come up to their celebrity, to their favorite one. Oh God, can I have your autograph? And I see it so many times in all the different aspects of sports that I've mentioned. I got time now, kid. They would, take a few seconds to scribble the name on it, and it's in every sport that I've seen it in. And I just wanted to tell you guys out there, the fans, that you'll never see that from me, and I've never forgotten all the support, even through my ups and downs of my careers, that you've given me. Because without you guys, I wouldn't have what I have. Sort of in that retirement mode right now, but I've got wonderful income. I've been able to do well with what I made. I got wonderful income for the next 20 years, and I'm doing what I'm doing now, and I'm getting paid for it. And I do personal appearances, and autographs, and I do these workshops. But it really isn't because if I need the buck. But I've figured out the last 6 months or so that. And thanking you guys for giving me what I have, but I want to try and I was trying to find a way to give back, and give back to the business that treated me so well, and gave me what I have. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm doing personal appearance autographs, and that's what doing the personal appearance and autographs for you guys, the fans out there, so that you get to see me again and then get the signed picture. But then these workshops that I'm doing, I'm trying to help these lost kids. Because the art form of our business is slowly diminishing. And if I can just pass on just a small inkling of information, and hopefully that their light bulbs will click on, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but maybe during a match that they had, that they'll remember what I said. And they said, oh God, I remember Steamboat told me about that. Oh, so this is what he means. It may come on, So basically that's what I'm doing now. And thanks to all you guys out there. Never forget you. There was a guy, I did an autograph session yesterday, and a guy came in. His name was George Silver. And he sent me a picture of himself, one that was probably 15 years old, a picture of him and me together. And he wrote in the letter, he says, you were at an autograph session, and you had a certain amount of time. And they said that the time had expired, and the line was out the door. And you stood there and said, no, I'm going to finish signing everybody that's in line because they've been waiting for hours. And I was at the back of the line. And he said, I'll never forget that. He said, you stood there for another hour to finish up. And he said, I'm sending you this letter and thanking you. And here's a picture that you took after the autograph session. And I saw this guy, George Silver, yesterday. And prior to that was 15 years ago.
Wow.
And he told me in the letter that he was going to try and make this autograph session that I was doing with this training school. And so I brought the letter and I brought the picture, and sure enough, he came yesterday. And I was signing autograph pictures and selling them. We were doing the Polaroids in the picture deal. And I said, George, and I pulled out his manila envelope, and inside of it, I said, I already signed you one. Yeah. And everybody in line they just thought that was so cool. Yeah. He said, no, this is yours. You don't have to pay for it. I mean, you're just one of those longtime fans. So thanks, you guys.
Thank you.